So I really want to talk about when you are left feeling confused by a partner's lack of interest, right? So you start out, there's this fiery erotic attraction to them, and then once you get between the sheets, it kind of fizzles out. And so you're sort of left wondering, like, did I do something wrong? How is it that the chemistry could feel like it had so much potential and then it just inevitably blows up in your face, right? And you really want to know what is the underlying problem so I can fix it. Now, today I really want to talk about a question that was posed in our Facebook feed, and that is, does a lack of sexual interest relate to avoidant attachment? Okay. So that's what we're going to talk about in this segment here. And I'm going to explain 6 what I think are crucially important factors that could be affecting a partner's lack of sexual interest when everything else seems to be such a good fit. Okay. And I invite you to stick with me because you don't want to needlessly pathologize a partner when there could be an easy answer or even a quick fix to it. Okay. Welcome to my YouTube channel. My name is Brianna McWilliam, and I am a licensed and board-certified creative arts therapist, author, and educator with more than 15 years in the field, helping adults struggling with insecure attachment go from self-doubting to self-sovereign so they can attract those soul-shaking, passionate partnerships that they want without having to talk in circles around their feelings for hours or even years on end with no tangible result. And I do this using a psycho-spiritual approach to creative arts interventions using the McWilliam method. Today, I'm going to be sharing a clip of a live stream event that took place inside my private Facebook groups, which people can access once they've purchased one of my online courses. If you're interested in finding out if you might have insecure attachment, check out the link in the caption of this video. You'll be able to take an easy 4-question quiz and find out your attachment style, plus a detailed explanation. Now, if you like what you see in here, and you haven't yet, make sure that you like, subscribe, and ring the bell for notifications. I put out videos once or twice a week, and sometimes I will do occasional live streams through my YouTube channel, and I wouldn't want you to miss out. Okay. So, to begin, one of the pitfalls of learning a framework like attachment styles or attachment theory, for understanding human behavior is that there's a tendency to pathologize that which we don't understand and to find a way to make it fit the framework. So before I would ever assume that attachment styles are at play here, I would have to consider at least 6 crucially important factors. So to my mind, the number one most important factor is you need to assess the subjective qualitative experience of this individual. So is this person troubled by their own lack of interest? Does it bother them because they want to have more of an interest in sex? Or does it bother them because it bothers their partner and their partner is dissatisfied with their lack of interest, right? Is that why it's actually causing problems in the relationship? And the answer is important because it speaks to a motivation for change, and it also speaks to the potential relevance of the second factor. So the second factor is you would have to rule out a dispositional or identity issue. What do I mean by that? Well, if the answer is that the lack of interest doesn't actually bother them alone, but it only bothers them because it creates tension in the relationship, then it might be worth considering that there's a dispositional issue here. So, for example, there are many asexual individuals who simply do not experience sexual attraction, but they are fully capable of secure, loving, and reciprocal relationships. Some asexual individuals enjoy romantic coupling without sexual intercourse. Others don't experience romantic feelings of infatuation at all, but it doesn't disrupt their level of functioning or their sense of their own life satisfaction. Maybe outside of whatever conditions they are up against in terms of a heteronormative society that tends to be highly eroticized. Okay. So there are a lot of resources online that are going to help you assess if you or your partner may be asexual, and it's worth checking those out before jumping to pathologizing a partner. Okay. Now, the third thing is I would rule out biological or physical issues, including mental health issues and medication side effects. Now, if the person does experience dissatisfaction with their own lack of sexual interest or feelings of aversion, let's say, when they want to have sex, then there might be something going on. So the first thing I would do is rule out hormonal or physical health issues, because obviously those have a significant impact on the body level, and that can affect your ability to get aroused and stay aroused. Additionally, certain conditions like ADHD, depression, certain mental health conditions, or low blood pressure can also affect arousal. Okay. Also, sexual dysfunction is a common side effect of certain medications, in particular SSRIs. So you definitely want to make sure that you look at the whole picture. Okay. Fourth, I'd rule out porn addiction. Now, it's related to physical issues, but obviously slightly different. I would rule out porn addiction, which is actually extremely prevalent but not very widely discussed or shared. And the effects of porn addiction are actually the same as drug addiction, and that includes an inability to focus on work, a lack of follow-through, inconsistent behaviors, needing instant gratification, feeling desperate for a fix, feeling shamed and hiding the habit, emotional explosivity, and so on. And this is particularly true for young cisgender men. One of the largest growing health issues for men ages 18 to 40 is erectile dysfunction. Now, historically, we might have jumped to the conclusion that sex and porn addiction is the result of a narcissistic parent. And there is still some truth to that, and if that were the case, then I might jump to attachment styles. But right now, with the rise of high-speed internet porn, we also have young boys from perfectly secure and loving families stumbling upon porn at increasingly early ages, which interferes with the natural evolution of the arousal system of their developing brains. So, Playboy and Hustler offer still images, which requires some flexing of the imagination, but now you can receive novel stimulation instantly with the click of a button. So over time, the brain will require increasing levels of novelty at an increased frequency in order to get aroused and stay aroused. So sexual intercourse with a real human being is slowed way down in real time. And so it becomes increasingly difficult and fraught with performance anxiety. Okay. So evidence to support this includes studies which show that men over 40 have a quicker and easier time recovering from porn addiction than their younger counterparts, and that's because their adolescent brains were more fully developed before high-speed internet porn became widely accessible. Now, just to note, I've highlighted the issues for cisgender men here, but I would also add that this does affect women, but there's far less research done on it, and it's a lot less likely to be reported. Okay. Now, number 5, I would rule out the 5 erotic blueprints. Now, I would also assess if perhaps the couple simply had not discovered their erotic blueprints. So, celebrity sex therapist, her name is Miss Jaya, she has a system which she calls the 5 erotic blueprints that she developed over decades of working with couples struggling with sex in their relationships. And she determined that almost all of us fall into one or more of these 5 categories. Now, the first one is energetic. So if you are an energetic, then you're very, very sensitive energetically, physically, and emotionally. So you might experience altered states during sex. But you need a slow and gentle approach, and so partners who come on too strong or too fast can cause you to kind of short circuit, and this shuts you off completely. So pleasure then turns to pain and aversion. Then there is the sensual. So sensual individuals are really into the sensual aspects of connection, and they appreciate all of their senses being stimulated. So having just the right atmosphere, a good meal, soft music, massaging touch, a slow and sensual buildup is what really gets them going. Then you have the sexual, and the sexual tends to be what is most commonly portrayed in our media and in porn. So if you are someone who has more of a sexual disposition, you are less likely to need foreplay, and it's kind of all about getting down to business. And you are very preoccupied with orgasm as being the main event, and you tend to revel in your baser nature. So rough, passionate sex excites you, and you may even enjoy ravishing your partner or being ravished by your partner. Then there's kinky. So you may have very particular tastes when it comes to sexual arousal and or playing with power dynamics and dominance and submission in the bedroom. Equally, penetration or sexual intercourse may not even be on the menu, okay, in order for you to experience a satisfying arousal. So you might be more inclined towards mind games or playing with shame and humiliation, or perhaps you're into role play and gender bending explorations. Whatever your proclivities are, they're typically anything but vanilla, okay? Then we have shapeshifters. So shapeshifters are turned on by all of the aforementioned blueprints, and they find it easy to relate to any one of them in the bedroom. So as a result, they tend to be very skilled lovers. They're very attuned to their partners, and their partners are usually very satisfied. However, because you are so varied in your talents and tastes, you may struggle with boredom or feeling like your sexual needs are not being met, especially if your partner is someone who ascribes to only one of the blueprints. Okay. So if you're interested in learning more about that, I invite you to check out my course, Relationship Rescue, on my website. I have a guest presenter. Her name is Sasha Fossa, who is a certified erotic blueprints coach and also an experienced and certified tantric sex instructor with over 20 years experience. And she explains a lot more about these styles and how they affect us in that course. Now, lastly, the sixth thing that I would consider, the sixth important factor, is I would consider that if there is a trauma history, there may be an influence upon attachment styles. Now, if all of the above fails to really get at the issue, then I would look at attachment styles and potentially a history of incidental or developmental trauma, like being raised by a narcissistic or abusive parent. Because sometimes if we have an insecure attachment style, it can lead to hyper or hyposexuality, which can sometimes manifest through things like sex or even love addiction. Now, although sex addiction and or sexual acting out behaviors manifest differently whether you are more anxious or more avoidant. So someone who's more anxious is probably struggling more with love addiction, and they are seeking validation and connection through the sex act. And now research also shows that anxiously attached individuals, they're more likely to engage in high-risk behaviors like not pushing for condom use because they don't want their no to create a conflict and threaten their partner's interest. Now, anxious partners are also likely to cheat because they don't feel appreciated, they have low self-esteem, they need an ego boost, or they're using sex as a way to spite their partner, make them jealous, or get them to pay attention or behave in a certain way. For more avoidantly attached individuals, hypersexuality may also provide a sense of validation and ego enhancement. It's also a way of experiencing contact control and an energetic release of anxiety that has been building up in the body. But they do this while compartmentalizing their emotional investment. So in the context of the relationship, they may use sex outside of the relationship as a way to assert their independence, which sometimes helps them stay in a primary relationship and keep their commitment of allocating most of their time and resources to one person. Now, on the other hand, it could help to keep their intimate partner at an emotional distance and prevent them from making that type of primary commitment. It just depends on why that person is avoidant and what the sex means to them. Now, on the opposite end of the spectrum, avoidant individuals can become hyposexual. Okay, now that means that they equate body boundaries with emotional boundaries, and they experience sexual contact as a repulsive kind of invasion, particularly if there's a history of sexual abuse or trauma. And so the result is kind of a splitting off of one's sense of self and identity from the body, okay, from the sensations and the needs and desires of the body. So other instances of this kind of mind-body emotional split are evidenced when you have someone that over-exercises, for example, or adheres to strict diets as a way of punishing and controlling the body and its emotional charge, which might be experienced like anxiety. Or on the other hand, in the same spectrum, a person might ignore the body or abuse it with unhealthy habits and or use it as a mask to kind of hide oneself from the threat of contact. Now, in this instance, it's super important for the proper therapeutic support to be available so that you can unpack that, and preferably with a sex therapist, right? A certified sex therapist, okay? So, to summarize my response to the question, does a lack of sexual interest mean that they're avoidantly attached, or does it relate to avoidant attachment? Now, I would consider the following. First, you want to assess the subjective qualitative experience of that individual. You want to rule out any dispositional or identity issues. You want to rule out biological or physical issues, including mental health issues or medication side effects. You want to rule out porn addiction. You want to rule out the 5 erotic blueprints. And if all of those things can be ruled out, then I would consider that if there is a history of trauma, then it may have an influence on attachment styles and be reflected in their level of sexual interest. Now, of course, any number of these factors could overlap with each other. We witness and we experience these intersecting factors as a gestalt, which is to say that the whole is greater than the sum of its parts. But it is worthwhile teasing out each component so that you are increasingly aware of what the most influential underlying factor may be, so that you know how to go about best addressing it, right? So if you're interested in learning more about that, I'll include some links in the caption of this video for my relationship rescue course. And I also want to share with you a TED Talk about porn addiction, because I think that's really an important thing that a lot of people aren't aware of, but it's actually quite impactful on our relationships.